Hello, everybody. It is your host for this episode, Kodey Stoffer here, letting you know that we got another slew of previews. All of these teams established NAIA squads here, and we got a couple of KCAC notables here, as well as a big-time preview for the national runner-ups last year in Keiser. I'm going to open us up with the Baker preview, as a matter of fact, before I pass it off to Coach V, who has a couple of our other big-time names here. But honestly, super excited to cover these teams. It's going to be a very fun episode with a lot of, firepower, obviously, being brought to the front page of it. And yeah, we're going to go ahead and get into it with the Baker Wildcats. Now, for this squad here, this was kind of their arrival year, was last year, in my opinion. They executed at a super high level. They competed with some of the best teams in the country very, very well, and ultimately, brought home a handful of wins, going a total of 13-9, with some notable wins along the way. Now, they had to shake off a 0-1 start against Kansas Wesleyan 14-6, but they bounced back with a big 39-0 win over William Woods. That would be the beginning of a 4-game win streak against KCAC opponents like Southwestern and Midland, both on the road, and then a 1-point win over Kansas Wesleyan here, having them feel good, get that revenge back, and being 4-1 heading into their first matchup with Ottawa, where they just fell short 24-12. They then bounced back by putting up 71 points on Bethel, and then another 40-33 respectively against St. Mary and Kodey, before once again just narrowly losing to Ottawa, showing that improvement though. 18-13, this one was on the road. I want to say this was the senior game for Ottawa as well. So it was just an interesting setup that they found themselves in. Once again, bounced back with a win against Southwestern at home before falling the opposite way to Kansas Wesleyan, just a one-score game, just a one-point game even. After beating them earlier in the season 20-19, Kansas Wesleyan gets it back 14-13. So a little bit of a rivalry developing there before beating Graceland and St. Mary's, scoring 40 points in both those games. And then Graceland once again. This was in the KCAC tournament, so they beat Graceland to start with a shutout before falling once again just short in a one-score game to Kansas Wesleyan. This in turn made them especially hungry coming into nationals, notching a 41-0 win over William Woods to start their pool play before just falling short to Keiser 21-13 to end their pool play. And this was notable because this resulted in an injury here to their starting quarterback, and that did not matter as the wear and tear carried over a little bit into that Warner game, and eventually the backup Sanaya Waller had to take over, and the Royals here were upset by the Baker Wildcats as they pulled off the 26-20 last-second jump ball win in one of the most electric upsets we've been able to cover live to date. So that was an exciting game, and then they ultimately fell short to Keiser 34-13. Just a little short-handed, running a little bit out of fumes and gas and whatnot. But this team, looking into this season, they have the exact same roster basically as last season here. It's actually insane as I was going through and just finding, she's returning. There are only 3 players that were on the roster last year that are not on the roster this year, and they're not the high-level players that, at least in my opinion, that a lot of these other ones are that are going to be coming back and contributing at a high level. You start at the quarterback position, where they are bringing back both Tara Lorente as well as Sanaya Waller here. Both of those players will be returning there. Both players who attempted over 100 pass attempts with Lorente going for 440 attempts and notching 2,533 yards, and Waller adding 846 of her own in this Perez-driven system here with multiple quarterbacks, lots of motion, lots of trickery, just overall very hard to defend and going to continue to come back. Running the football was basically everybody. Once again, Waller kind of leading in the second spot here of that quarterback and running back and wide receiver spot, 360 yards. You also got Kaylee Phillips, who notched 288 yards, and then once again Lorente with over 100 attempts, got over 735 yards, averaging 6.9 yards per carry, which is pretty dang good considering that every 20 yards is first down. So if you run that 4 times in a row, you are going to get a first down. But obviously, with some misdirection, with high-level athleticism, and with flag evasion, that's only going to continue to improve here. And then the ball was spread out super duper well. Mahogany Simmons was a player who, as a freshman, notched 624 receiving yards. You also have Waller, who caught for over 400 yards. Kaylee Phillips, 597 yards. Then you have Gabriella Zabalata here, who at center / a little bit of quarterback play got 394 receiving yards. Jalen Harris, kind of their jump ball specialist here, 553 yards. Faith Phillips, who had another 216. I mean, overall, just a slew of talent. Even Lorente got in there for 177 yards. It's just an electric offense here with high-level athleticism coming from a bunch of different directions. And in turn, they scored a lot of points. Looking at Kaylee Phillips, she had 6 rushing touchdowns and 11 receiving touchdowns. High-level athlete. I believe this athlete, specifically Kaylee Phillips, is somebody who came over from Heston, I want to say, and was a high-level contributor there and is seamlessly fit in here. Waller had 6 touchdowns of her own combined. Zabaleta had 6. Jalen Harris, 12 receiving touchdowns last year. Just absolutely getting it done. Faith Phillips, I think, going to see an uptick in production as well. And then Lorente here with 11 rushing touchdowns and then three receiving touchdowns. So it just doesn't stop no matter which way you look at it here. Defensively, once again, going to keep that cohesion with Simmons and Martinez both returning to the fold here and going to contribute at a high level. Now, this upcoming year is a very senior-heavy group here in this locker room here, but I know that KCAC Coach of the Year, Willie Perez, is looking to capitalize off of this team and, just bring it this year and try and secure a national championship. They're going to try and push for that. You got Destiny Martinez, who is a senior this year. Kaylee Phillips is a senior this year. You got a handful of juniors here that have been with this program and have laid down the foundation and done the work on the ground, trying to push this needle to that next level here as they've continuously improved every year, but this year really trying to push over the top. And as I mentioned last year, as far as accolades go, KCAC announced that the 2025 Coach of the Year was Willie Perez here, and, earning that 3rd seed in the KCAC as well as that upset I know that they pulled off in Nationals. But there's also 8 players who made the all-conference list. Kaylee Phillips, Sanaya Waller, Jalen Harris, Mahogany Simmons, Gabriella Zabaleta, as well as Phillips and Walker, Melanie Asmar, as well as Kayla Harrison and Destiny Martinez were also honorable mentions. So these were all big-time ballers here. And, yeah, they were able to convert in a lot of ways that they formerly weren't able to with that injection of Kaylee Phillips, who also had a very good showing at Nationals, in my opinion, as far as trying to pick up a little bit of the load when injuries struck. Now, looking back at us at PMC from the last year, Tara Lorente was a part of the Breakout Player of the Year group. So that was a high-level player that was making some noise. I know that she was in conversations for quarterback as well. Utility player, Sanaya Waller was a part of our voting for Utility Player of the Year at her position. So, a lot more Baker representation in that second year than there was in that first year. And just really also made Sanaya Waller, that is, also made the All-PMC team at the utility spot back for our 25 awards here. So this is a squad that has gotten it done a little bit more at that next level. They have a slew of accomplished players, experienced players, and they also bring in a slew of new freshmen who have experience here. I'm looking at Ava Alvarez here, who is a 2022 15U World Championship, or World Champion, I should say, through FFWCT. Also notched a World Championship in 24 and an FHSAA State Championship as well from her time in Florida. She was on the 2023 17U Team USA roster, and in high school threw for just about 5,000 yards and ran for another 1,000 with almost 100 touchdowns to her name. She's another quarterback to throw into this mix for the crazy system that Coach Willie uses and is going to contribute at a high level with great athleticism and high-level experience. You also have Natalie Bush. She was selected to the U.S. Army All-American Bowl. She was a flag athlete of the month back in Florida, and she fits that versatile kind of play style, having a crazy junior season where she caught for over 1,400 yards and 33 touchdowns in high school, but also had over 1,000 career rushing yards, and then her senior year throwing the ball for 1,800 yards and 27 touchdowns. And while she did throw a handful of interceptions at quarterback, she would get some of those back, forcing 7 of her own in her senior year and also notching 17 pass deflections. She's also a once accomplished high-level pass rusher to begin her high school career. So if it's a position on the field, Bush has played it and found success and obviously made national waves by notching an appearance at that All-American Bowl. Daniela Canals here was a rusher in high school, but really in fives a success story at center and rush while making second team All-Dade and was a part of that Palmetto powerhouse squad. Then you also have Mariah Greenfield, another accomplished fives player, this time hailing from the Northeast in Maryland. They also bring in transfer Brianna Hertlein from STU. Not sure if she's going to be able to play, but I think she is because it's cross-conference. So that's going to be another shot in the arm from an experienced team on that STU squad, and she's going to bring her own experiences into the fold. Jaden Keith, now this is an athlete who I think is going to see the field and is going to make a high-level impact immediately. She has great instincts on defense. She attacks the ball. She's very, very fast, and I think that she's going to be an effective gadget player. She's somebody who made jet sweeps incredibly effective in fives. She has a seamless spin move, great moves, easy change of direction, and high-level maneuverability that's going to make her a problem anywhere. I think that she could also help in this defensive secondary, in the pass defense, and see if they can force a few more turnovers and turn those turnovers into points as well. And then finally, there's Tara Mortimer and then Kamai Moore here, who's another explosive piece of that Palmetto squad. She got 13 touchdowns her senior year while collecting 10 picks over her career and 30 pass breakups with over 140 flagpoles. So another couple of defensive studs to look at for this upcoming season for Baker. These are all just the freshmen here who have joined the fold, and they are all high-level players that are going to make an impact. Now, looking at their schedule here in February, they got Midland and then Benedictine Mesa at home. So that's going to be February 25th and 28th. I think that this is a way that they could start off 2-0, as Midland recently had a quarterback step up that is going to be their starter for them this season. More on that later in Coach V's segment. But that could be a surprise game. It could be a trap game very early in the season. So the Wildcats are going to have to come prepared. They then have a March 4th game against St. Mary's before facing Ottawa at home once again. This is a chance for them to make a statement. If they come into this game 3-0, they come in confident, they play fast, they play their brand of football versus an Ottawa team that has just never lost in the national championship. This would kind of be the official announcement that Baker is here, and this is a very interesting high-level game on 3/11 here, where we're going to try and catch a vibe and catch that game. After that, they have Southwestern and Kansas Wesleyan at home. I think that they have a chance to go 2-0 in this stretch. Kansas Wesleyan, once again, I am just kind of waiting to see what this squad looks like under new leadership for this team, for the Yotes. And so far, I have Baker favored in that game. Before getting Heston and Bethel and William Woods, I think that this is a game with their experience and with their talent. They should go 3-0 down that stretch, heading into April, where they then have Kodey, Midland, and Graceland on the road. Now, this season, less repetitive opponents here, but I still think that they might have a few other games to add maybe because there's 12 here, but I guess with the KCAC tournament, they could have another 2 or 3. But for now here, they're sitting at that bottom 12 threshold that you're supposed to have, and this should be a 10-win season, at least a 10-win season for this team. I don't think that the 3 games that I could see them losing, or I guess 4 games if you include that rematch with Midland, is maybe one of the Midland ones, maybe the Kansas Wesleyan one, and maybe the Ottawa one. I think that they win 3 out of those 4 games, or at least 2 out of those 4. So a window of wins here between 9 and 11 really is how I'm feeling about this Baker squad. I could easily see them heading into the KCAC tournament at 11-1 or 10-2, and I think that that's the expectation this year for a squad that has experience. They've brought in some electric athletes as well from their freshman class that are going to contribute at a high level, and with, I think in our preseason national team, you have Tara Lorente here, who I think could be that difference maker and could be that, national level, national competing quarterback that has a chance to step up with so many of the pioneers having graduated over this past couple of years. It's it's someone else's turn to show who's next. And this could be Baker's opportunity to fill that spot and take over. But for now, I'm not going to project an undefeated season quite yet, as I am still looking at that auto squad. That K-Dub squad also is bringing back a lot of the same high-level players. You look at Chihiro Iwata, you look at Aaliyah Woods here. Those are all teams and players that I think are going to make an impact. But I do really like Baker's odds in all of their games, and they should be competitive across the board heading into this season. Now, that's all I got for the Baker Wildcats here. I'm super excited to see what all they do here, as, like I said, they're bringing back everybody basically from last year. I know this squad is hungry. They got an injection of solid freshman contributors and should be ready to take that next step into that echelon of national contenders for NAIA flag football. Now, passing off to Coach V to keep us in the KCAC.
Okay, so now let's go ahead and talk about Midland. It is January 20th, 2026 when I am recording this segment for Midland here. And let's start by talking about last season. So Midland, obviously, one of the teams we have been covering for the longest here. Last year, a little bit of a step back as far as wins and losses go. They did play one less game. I think they played 20 in 2024, and then in 2025 only played 19 here. And in those 19 games, they won 9-10, 4-4 in conference, which is not bad. The KCAC is one of the toughest conferences, probably a top 2 conference in the country, regardless of division and whatnot, for women's flag football. And so 4-4 is not that bad. And then going 9-10 as a whole. But to start, they had 3 games against arguably the toughest teams in the conference. This weekend was really made for the top 4 teams in the KCAC and Kansas Wesleyan, Baker, and Ottawa. And, they would go in and they would lose to Kansas Wesleyan 14-33. That game just wasn't really close there. But then they would bounce back and they would beat Baker, who was highly touted going into the preseason, or from the preseason to the regular season was highly touted. So that was a big win for Midland right there, 33-19, before losing to Ottawa 34-0. And like I said, that Baker game, that was a big win right there. Not maybe not the cleanest offensive performance, but they found a way to go ahead and get it done. And that was to start the season. Now, in March, this is where they played the bulk of their games, at least during the regular season. And it would start with a rematch against Baker, which they would lose 6-20 in a closer game. They would bounce back at home with a win over St. Mary, which is, as expected, 34-6. And then they would lose. This was kind of shocking. They would lose to William Woods 26-0. We thought it would be a closer game going into that one, but it just was not, as they just did not play a good game in this one and just got caught off guard, it seemed, as they fell to the first-year program that was William Woods. But then they would bounce back the following weeks and beat Bryan Stratton in a dominating one, 60-6. Still a junior college, but one of the colleges that have been around with flag football for a while. And then this would be a big out-of-conference win here over Campbellsville, 26-7, as it seemingly looked like they put it all together and got a massive win over Campbellsville in one that was just not close really at all here. But Angel Ioane Kyle played a great game in that one, and then the defense obviously only allowed one touchdown. And then that would set up this matchup versus Kansas Wesleyan, where they would lose in heartbreaking fashion, 14-15. That was a great game, an instant classic right there, as it really feels like at this point Midland found their form. They would then go ahead and bounce back with a 33-12 win over Graceland before losing to Ottawa 38-7. Now April was a bit better for them. They would go ahead and win the majority of their games here, beating Southwestern 33-6. Kodey only 13-0 in a close one, but a win's a win. They would bounce back and beat Bethel 61-0, and then once again they would play Kansas Wesleyan, and once again just falling a little bit short, 13-20, the second game so far this regular season where they lost by a score. And then this was interesting, but instead of going to the KCAC postseason tournament, they decided to go ahead and play the University of Nebraska's club flag football team in front of 11,000 people down over there in Lincoln, which is obviously massive. That grows the game a whole ton. And like I said, at the time I'm recording this, it is January 20th. The University of Nebraska, believe it or not, first Power 4 D1 team to go ahead and sponsor a women's varsity flag football program, which they will be giving scholarships out for here soon. So first off, absolutely massive news. I have no doubt that Midland had a hand in helping make that happen there, but they've also done just a very good job. I'm going to go ahead and talk on Midland a little bit here. They've done a very good job just building flag football over there in Nebraska the last couple of seasons, between helping and reaching out to the youth girls club flag football teams in the area, and then obviously playing the University of Nebraska club team. That is obviously massive right there. So there you go. That is technically their 20th game if I had to pick. So technically they did play 20 games this season here, but that one doesn't necessarily count there. But still a great game to play in. And so they would not play in the KCAC postseason tournament, but they would play in the NAIA postseason tournament. And it started out rough. They pulled Thomas and Kansas Wesleyan in pool play, which is as bad as it could get, I feel. But they lost to Thomas 41-7. They would play Kansas Wesleyan close, would fall to them once more. So 3 out of 4 matchups this last season were one-score games against K-Dub, and would lose 21-26. Now, I don't know if winning that game would have put them in the upper bracket. If they did, they would have been near the bottom of the bracket anyways. But that is a tough one to lose right there. They would play in the silver bracket, though. They would go ahead and beat Kodey 42-0 in a very convincing fashion before falling to Milligan in the semis 20-27 in yet another close game here, which is obviously tough playing in that many close games, but definitely competing and showing out. Milligan obviously would go on and would win this silver bracket here, beating William Woods by a decent amount, I feel. So with all that being said, it was an alright year for Midland. 9-10. I mean, they grew the game with that game against Nebraska, and obviously that's a great experience for your players as well. But definitely a little bit middle of the pack here as far as PMC rankings go. We had them at 11th before the NAIA tournament, and that's probably around 11-10 is around where they would finish at the end of the season, which is on brand. There's definitely like teams that they are better than, and then there are some teams that they're not quite past just yet. So there you go, but still a very good program. Not a bad year, 9-10. Looking to build on that. But let's go ahead and talk about some of the players that they do lose, though, because they do lose a pretty decent amount. Now, the majority of these departures are graduates here, starting with the quarterback, Angel Ioane Kayo, a longtime starter for them. Had her ups and downs. I think last season definitely had some very good games there for sure that put Midland where they want to be, which is winnable situations, right? But unfortunately, she will be graduating, and she was obviously their leading passer last year. She had 2,825 passing yards, 38 passing touchdowns to, I believe, 17 interceptions in about 14 games that were listed for them. Was also their leading rusher with 206 yards and 3 touchdowns. Obviously, anytime you lose a starting quarterback, that is tough. Losing somebody like Angel Ioane Kayo, who was able to put up numbers, that just adds to it, right? And her being a multi-year starter, the college game is a little bit different, and it's hard for quarterbacks to adjust to the speed right away. And so definitely a loss there. She's not gone forever, obviously. She is still actually with Midland, but as an assistant offensive coach, so she will be able to mentor whatever quarterback they decide to go with for this season. So, not bad, right? But obviously not a quarterback from this last season that was on the roster. They also graduate Sydney Red, who was an all first-team linebacker for Midland, which is awesome. She was a great player, super underrated in her career for Midland, honestly, and that's going to be a tough one. That's also a player that they could have rushed as well. Last season for Midland was their leader in flagpoles with 67 in 13 games. Also had a pick to go with that. And so that's obviously going to be really tough to replace. They also graduate Nadia Simpson, who did not make an all-conference team, but had 40 pulls as well as an interception and 9 breakups in 14 games. That's another linebacker, defensive player that you are missing from this Midland squad. Midland also graduates Mayana Seegers and Morgan Kalasek, who were contributors in the passing game here. Kalasek, 44 receptions for 449 yards and 4 touchdowns, while Seegers had 23 receptions for 237 yards and a touchdown as one of their checkdown options for them. And then last but not least, want to name off these other players that will no longer be with them, or at least not with them on this roster here, in Desenia Barcinas, Ashanti Griffin, Tara Tuali, Lila Elizalde, Kobe J, and then Zaria Tanner are not listed on the roster for this 2026 season. So that would go ahead and total to 11 players who are no longer on the roster. They would bring in 8 more players, including a transfer as well, and that is official. So they are losing about 3 players, but still a pretty healthy, number and roster for them going into this next season. And so let's talk about some of those new additions here before we talk about the players that are coming back that we should be looking out for, starting with Melanie Archuleta, aka Ducky, who we know from down here in Colorado, played for Chatfield High School, won a state championship, center linebacker for them, somebody who also plays some tackle football. you can listen to any of our previews and recaps covering her. She is a super smart player, athletic, can do it all, could catch the ball, has strong hands, and aggressive at stopping, runs, and plays the pass very well, something she definitely improved on through her years as we covered her in high school. But she now comes into Midland, and, they are losing some linebacker spots, a center spot. That is definitely somebody that could be a plug-and-play type of player and contribute to this Midland team that does have a decent amount of veterans already on there for her to learn from. So that's good, obviously, there. So there you go. That's Ducky Archuleta. They also bring in Holiness Hodges, goes by Mara, I believe, from Washington, plays wide receiver DB, and is very polished for a freshman at both positions, I would say. She could definitely start both ways sometime in the future. This year, we'll see. Like I said, a lot of veterans over there, but she is going to play where she is needed and adds just another skill player that you can move around. I think she has a very strong hands, has good change of direction, very strong player as well. At DB, I really like what I saw. Just very aggressive at attacking that football, attacking those hands there. And, in this conference in the KCAC, there are some very good receivers. There are some high-flying offenses. To be a successful DB in this conference, if you are in one-on-one, you have to be able to match the physicality and win in one-on-one. You might not get another opportunity, right? And so that is definitely a player that you want to have on your squad. And so I think Mara Hodges is going to be big time for them. As far as wide receivers go, she has a great group of wide receivers to learn from. And I think, she could really develop into a reliable receiving option down the line. Now, picking this up a little bit here, just because I can't talk about every single player that they're bringing in, but they bring in Elena Weber, a wide receiver DB from Vegas in Nevada. They bring in Dawson Barahowski, a almost 6-foot wide receiver DB from Longwood, Florida. Has pretty decent speed and has a lot of potential over there at both wide receiver and DB. Could use maybe a little bit of development, though. They also bring in Emma Rodriguez from Oregon, running back DB. Actually used to play quarterback over there and switching over. Super smart, athletic. Definitely somebody who will need to develop a little bit, but if you have a good athlete back there playing safety, that's not the worst thing, obviously. And then last but not least, they bring in Skylar Cooley, a freshman here, listed as an athlete, also plays soccer. This will be her first time playing flag football, but as we've seen before, plenty of dual sport athletes succeed at playing flag football. It's been done before. So there you go. Now, they also bring in 2 more players, and it's going to get really interesting because as of right now, I believe these are the 2 players listed at quarterback on this roster, both freshmen here. And so there will be a little bit of a quarterback battle, starting with Karina Alfaro, who committed to Midland originally, I guess, first between the 2 quarterbacks. Out of Las Vegas, Nevada, she's a smart quarterback who, could definitely contribute over here for them. Now, she will have to adjust to the game. I mean, that's something all freshman quarterbacks have to do who may not have as much experience playing on other levels outside of high school, but definitely somebody to look out for. And then you have a transfer, a mid-year transfer, mind you, as she originally committed to Lindsey Wilson down in Kentucky, who we previewed. Make sure you check that out. But she has transferred mid-a-year to Midland here, and because it's, non-conference, there are no restrictions there, and she does not have to sit out, and so she will be eligible to play for Midland potentially. But that is Lotta Wolf, the quarterback from Turku, Finland here. She is the quarterback for Finland's national team for flag and tackle, by the way. And, I got to watch a lot of her film while preparing for the Lindsey Wilson preview. And then it came out a day or two before I recorded that she was going to transfer. And so, look, she's the real deal. Has made some big time throws on the national level, and there's some great players over there for sure. Can throw deep, has good touch passes and whatnot. But, it is a little bit different over here on the collegiate level in the States. We'll see what happens, but whoever will start at quarterback will be one of these two freshmen, either Naufara or Wolf. We'll see what happens, but I think they have some decent options here, as well as Angel Ioane Kyle over there being an assistant coach to guide them along the way. And then obviously they return their coaches here in Kerwin James and Chase Anderson. They also bring in Jermaine McCown, or I think it's McCowan, I want to say. That's how you say that. Who will be joining the staff, as well as Angel Ioane Kyle. So, got a filled out coaching staff. You have a pretty decent, I would say a pretty good, recruiting class right here. And I think the good thing about this is that you have some players that could play right away, that could slot in and could contribute, but for the most part, Midland does return a lot of their core, a core that has been starting since their freshman year. And so let's just go down the line and talk about it here, starting with Elijah Livingston, who was a second-team conference wide receiver for Midland. And if I could pull up the stats here, last season was one of their top receivers for them. Was their top receiver in the 14 games listed, had 56 receptions for 667 yards and 12 touchdowns for them. I believe she caught the most receiving touchdowns for them, at least. Yes, that is true. And then I want to say defensively as well, also added on 38 flagpoles and another 4 interceptions and 5 pass breakups. So somebody who has been playing both sides of the football, who's been a dynamic athlete for Midland, comes back for year 4 here, has been starting for a while too. Going into year 4, the sky's the limit. I think she has just been getting started. From watching the games last season, I mean, this is my opinion. When she gets the ball, she is dynamic with the ball in her hands. But there were some struggles last year getting her the ball. So we'll see what happens and whatnot. But when she gets the ball, she's electric. She is a deep ball threat as well. Can burn somebody in one-on-one and just go make it happen. And so probably expect her to be wide out one for them as well going into this next season. So there's that. They also bring back Olivia Dominguez-Millsap, who was a second-team DB. Jocelyn Lopez, who was an all-conference honorable mention for them as well. And, those are both players that have contributed to this offense for really, I don't know, it feels like forever, honestly. But Olivia Dominguez-Millsap last season, 50 receptions for 463 yards and 11 receiving touchdowns as their second leading receiver for them. Alyssa Butler, a little bit of a down year here in the 13 games listed, 9 receptions, 121 yards, and a touchdown. So a little bit of a down year, but looking to bounce back here. Olivia Dominguez-Millsap, though, on defense really turned it up. She was also their interception leader, 12 interceptions on the year. And let me see if I can find some flagpoles, and as well as 27 flagpoles for her in the 14 games listed for her. And she has always been super productive for them. Pretty much expect the same thing going into year 2. Defensively, she's going to be massive with them losing some of their defensive starters here, bringing back somebody who has started pretty much for 4 years, 3 or 4 years at this point. That matters. Experience matters, as there aren't many other teams with this much experience on the roster. So between Olivia Dominguez-Millsap and Alyssa Butler and all the players I've just mentioned so far, I mean, all these players have been starting for a very, very long time, or at least it feels that way. They've been starting for a very, very long time. Before moving on, I want to mention a couple other players here that will be returning Emily Farron for them was very productive last season. 46 receptions, 388 yards, and 4 touchdowns. Kind of got lost a little bit in the rotation here, but another reliable receiver who has been producing for a while and could still be better going into her senior year for them. They bring back Eunice Samabali. I think that is, I am sorry if I am completely just butchering that, but she is somebody that will probably get rotated in at center because they do lose Seegers, and or linebacker or somewhere on defense over there for them. They bring back, I think it's Nataya, and excuse me if I'm saying that wrong, but Blaylock, who was a rusher for them last season and was very productive for them. 6 sacks against Kodey in that game that she had. She'll be returning as well, and so that's a huge player to be bringing back. They also bring back Renee Ryupina Tuayo. I want to say that's how you say that. I definitely feel like I mispronounced that, and I apologize if I do. But started at DB for them as a freshman, super athletic, and definitely somebody who, with a offseason underneath their belt, could take some big strides forward. So there you go there. And so I'm just making sure I got everyone here. So you have her, you have Blaylock, Jocelyn Lopez, Naomi, Ryupina Tuayo, Olivia Dominguez-Millsop, Emily Farron, Eunice Samble, Alyssa Butler, Elia Livingston. I mean, a lot of these players started for them, not just last season, but for a couple seasons now. You have some very, very, very experienced veterans over here, and there might not be, I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and think about it, but I don't know if there are many other teams around the country that have this many 3-year, 4-year starters. And that does matter. It definitely matters having this many players who are experienced, because a lot of these players also played both ways. They could go ahead and mentor the younger players and, share a lot of experience, because like I said, there aren't many other players in the country that have as much experience as them. Maybe Ottawa, to be honest with you. Other than that, I don't know. And so we've been saying it for a while. This has been a good core to build with. They've found success. Now they enter their senior year. This is it. At least for women's college flag football, for a lot of these players. After this, they'll go do their own thing, and they could still play flag football, obviously, and maybe even do it professionally. But right now, this will be their final season for a lot of these players here going into 2026. And I think they have a really good mix. Let's talk about the roster first here. I think really, you got some great skill players, wide receivers, DBs. It's filled out pretty well. At center, you have a couple different options. Center, running back, you have a couple different options there, which is obviously good to see. Defensively, at linebacker, you recruited players who could hop in there and go ahead and get it done. I like the idea of Ducky Archuleta getting up in there and making an instant impact. But there's going to be probably a little bit of learning curve at least there. And honestly, really, when watching Midland, maybe the scores wouldn't always reflect this, but defensively, it felt like Midland was pretty good. All right, it felt like unless they just allowed and just played bad and allowed wide open touchdowns, which didn't happen that much at all. When they were locked in, this defense is probably top 5 in the country, if not top 10 at the very least in the entire country. They communicate well and do a good job. So like I said, unless it's just a total miscommunication, which didn't happen often, I felt like this Midland defense played at a very high level. Now, I will say though, the offense had its struggles last year. I think at quarterback, Angel Ioane-Kyle, there were some games where she played really well, and then there were some games that maybe took a little bit of time, a little bit too long to get going there, and it costed them some games, right? They had a couple close ones there, which, some of them were, just starting slow. Others were just unfortunate losses, right? That's just what it is. You left it all out there. You did what you could. There's some small things you needed to tweak, and it just ended up in a loss, right? And so the offense has been a little up and down here. But now we're looking at this team. You have very experienced wide receivers here who, I mean, it's as good as it gets as far as wide receiving rooms go. You also added a couple of freshmen who could hop in there and contribute too. You have some new quarterbacks in there. Your old quarterback is now coaching some of these players, and that experience is super valuable. Just being able to see it from a coaching perspective and mentoring these quarterbacks, that's going to be massive. That's an advantage here. But they are still freshman quarterbacks that you are working with. And so, this season could look a lot like the season from last year, maybe closer to the season from 2 years ago, because I really, really like the experience they have. I mean, when you have a team like Midland, it's really hard to imagine that they will be more than one game under 500, worst case scenario, right? Other than that, they're going to come play. They're one of the best teams in the country. They've been super consistent and successful for a reason. And so you have a lot of veterans on this roster, but I think you do have a good mix here of younger players for Midland to go ahead and have a successful season, which I would consider probably making the NAI Invitational. They have to have some freshmen step up and play at a high level, because what the veterans are going to do. They're going to play well, and they're going to set the tone. Even if it's a disaster to start a game, that the veterans of Midland are going to settle them down and get down to playing Midland flag football and make it a close game at the very end, right? And so it's going to come down to seeing how well some of these freshmen can contribute right away, because that's the position they're in. That obviously includes the quarterback position as well. If you could get good quarterback play, this Midland team is for sure going to make the Invitational. Now, if it's up and down, they might be on that edge. And so we'll see what happens. They might need some bounces to go their way, but we will have to just see how it all goes down. I think the consistency of this offense is definitely going to matter here as far as the team's success goes. Defensively, like I said, not super concerned. So with all that being said, let's just go ahead and look at their schedule here. We'll go game by game and talk about it, talk about the matchups and how they're looking. To start, we got Baker. Baker, to my knowledge, pretty much returns everyone, at least the majority of their starters. And it's also in Baker as well. I'm probably counting that as a loss. Tara Lorente making our preseason all-PMC list. She's due for a big season. She's going to put up numbers. Really, when it comes down to playing a team like Baker that has such an experienced offense, I like the matchup with the defense, but I do worry about the offense matching up with their defense, who has some significant athletes over there who are big time and super underrated, I would say as well. So I'm probably counting that as a loss. Then they play Heston, who is now an NAIA team. That should definitely be a win. Then they play Kansas Wesleyan, and this gets interesting. I mean, I would consider this a rivalry game. I feel like the last 2 years they've played games where it's come down to touchdowns at the end. And Kansas Wesleyan, they lose a lot. You got to keep that in mind. They definitely lose a lot. They have a new head coach, right, who hasn't been coaching flag football for as long as this staff here. It may not be a popular opinion, but after looking at this Midland roster, I know the K-Dub preview has already come out, but after looking at this Midland roster, playing in Nebraska, and just looking at last season and how many times they were in some close games there, I think this one being their third game definitely benefits them as well. I like Midland beating Kansas Wesleyan right here at home. Now, it's going to be close, and when it comes down to close games, that means usually it could go either way, right? But I like Midland right now here. After that, they play Kodey and Bethel. Those should both be wins. Then they play William Woods at home. I'm probably calling this one a win for Midland, but who knows? I know they have a young quarterback over there. But the more I think about it, a young quarterback against an experienced defense isn't exactly great. I know William Woods returned some players on that defense, but not to the level that Midland does, so I'm leaning Midland here. Then they play St. Mary, and that should probably be another win. They just lost their head coach. Even then, the roster was maybe not as filled out as you wanted it to be, and I just think Midland beats them as well. And so that actually roughly brings you to the halfway point of the regular season. And at this point in the season, I mean, they could have lost only one game. I think they're probably either going to lose the Baker or Kansas Wesley game, if not both. But even then, I mean, St. Mary, William Woods, Bethel, Kodey, Heston, that's 5 wins right there. And William Woods will be close, but I don't think the other ones will be close at all. So that's a really good spot to be in if you are Midland, because you got to make the Invitational and you got to be at least top 10, if not top 8, I think, to make it. And so you got to beat those teams, and then winning against a Baker or Kansas Wesleyan only helps you. Losing against both wouldn't be bad, right? But I kind of feel like they could play both close potentially. Now, after that, they go ahead and they go to St. Francis, the University of St. Francis, where they'll play a couple games. Those haven't been released yet, but there are some first-year programs mixed in there. I kind of like Midland against a lot of those, but we'll see, how that goes down. Then they play Siena Heights. This gets really, really interesting right here. I think Siena Heights is going to take a step forward here. Also, this game is listed in Indiana too. I am going to lean Siena Heights. No, I'm going to go with Midland. I think it'll be close, but I think with the experience that you have, I just have a hard time seeing them lose that game. Then they play St. Francis. I think that's a loss, right? Or a win right there over St. Francis. So sorry, there you go. Those are the St. Francis games, but I think there will be more than just Siena Heights and St. Francis right there. We'll see what happens. But I'm going to say they go ahead and get wins over Siena Heights and St. Francis. Then they have to travel to Ottawa. That's tough. That's probably a loss, unless they really just go ahead and challenge Ottawa here defensively. And they haven't quite been able to do that the last couple years. Their defense hasn't had the best performances. I'm probably going to say that's a loss. Then they play Graceland. This is a classic trap game for sure. Graceland is better. I don't want to say significantly better, but they're going to be better across the board. They bring in some good freshmen as well that could play at a high level. This could be a loss. And so I'm going to call it a loss here. Like I said, trap game for sure. Maybe it's a win and it's not close at all. Who knows? But I really feel like that's going to be a trap game on a Tuesday too. I don't know. I think that's probably a loss there. But we'll see. It should be a good one though. Then they play Baker on that Saturday. I think that is for sure a loss. Baker, especially at the end of the season, is a team that you really don't want to be playing. So that's tough right there. And then they play Southwestern, and that should probably be a win. I'd be surprised if it wasn't. So with all that being said, right now, Baker and Ottawa, Kansas Wesleyan, the 3 teams I think have the best chances at beating them. You have some other teams mixed in here as well. Siena Heights, William Woods, Graceland. These are all teams that I would still favor Midland in. But, I wouldn't be surprised if those were losses either. And so honestly, just how I've always done season previews, I'm going to go ahead and give Midland the benefit of the doubt. They have veterans. They have a good coaching staff. They've added some good freshman players. Now, like I said, it's going to come down to which freshmen play at a high level, which could do it at a consistent level, and I think that's going to impact some of these games directly, because you have your core. Your core is going to win you some games for sure by a lot, and then they're going to keep you in some games until it comes down to you having to lean on somebody else for once, and then that's going to be really interesting to see how that goes, because, they lose a very good core after this season. So after this year, some players are going to have to step up. looking into some of those close games against William Wood, Siena Heights, Graceland might even show you which players will step up after this core leaves going to next season, which will be really exciting to see for sure. I think there's going to be plenty of opportunities for players to step up and play at a high level. But, Midland, they're a good program. I think for them to make the Invitational, ideally, you'd love to beat a Baker, K-Dub, or Ottawa at least once. Like, it doesn't even have to be a winning record against that group. But I think a single win against that group would be great. And then if you could sweep the rest, or at least have a good winning record against the rest, you are in a very good position if you are Midland. And I think they could do it. Their quarterback, is whoever they go with, is going to get better as the season goes on, as she settles in. Defensively, I think they'll get better as the season goes on, and, the spots at linebacker and whatnot are filled, and they, get more comfortable over there. But I really feel like it's going to come down to how consistent this offense could be. And if they are, look out, Midland. And I feel like we say this every year, but Midland, maybe a dark horse again and can make some noise here. So we'll see what happens here, but definitely rooting for this team, rooting for all the players and the coaches out there, and looking forward to a great season for Midland going into 2026. Okay, now let's go ahead and talk about Keiser here. At the time I'm recording this segment, by the way, it is January 13th, 2026, but I don't really anticipate there being many changes to this team before the season starts, but I just wanted to make sure I threw that out there. But you know what? Let's go ahead and talk about Keiser here. Let's start with last season, where they had their best year, I think, in program history, going 20-2. They become the third team all-time in women's college flag football history to win 20 games here. Thomas did it first, and then Ottawa also did it with them last season, I believe. And so it was a very successful year in conference of the Sun Conference here. They went 7-1, widely known to be probably the toughest conference for flag football. At least in my opinion, I think it's the toughest right now. And they went 7-1, very, very dominant. Their only loss was to Thomas in a close one, 19-20. Fell short in a classic right there, but undefeated otherwise in the regular season. I'm just going to go down the line and list off their wins. Against FMU, 68-0. Warner, who's a top 10 team, top 5 team, I would say even last year, 20-6. St. Thomas, another top 5 team, / top 10 team, they beat 34-7. Siena Heights, they beat them 57-0. In the Tampa tournament, they beat Pasco 68-0, UCF's club team 52-0, and Daytona State 54-0. Dominant wins right there against non-NAIA teams. Then they go ahead and beat Life University 54-6, a team who's just outside the top 10. Then they would suffer that loss to Thomas, but would bounce back with a 65-0 win over Point, an 89-0 win over Reinhardt, and a 67-0 win over Atlantis, which is crazy. And then they would this is probably their most impressive non-NAIA win, but they would go ahead and beat Florida Gateway in a close one, though, 7-0, and then close out the regular season with a 42-6 win over Weber and 65-0 against Florida Memorial. Now, in the Sun Conference tournament here, they would go ahead and keep that success rolling and beat St. Thomas 35-0, absolutely dominating them, and then go to the conference championship. And mind you, this was in Thomasville because they lost to Thomas in the regular season, and they would go ahead and win 33-15 to reclaim the Sun Conference title. This is the first time I believe they've ever beat Thomas in Georgia as well. And so Keiser would really just go in this and beat Thomas straight up here and avenge that regular season loss, becoming the Sun Conference champions. And I would definitely say probably locking themselves into that gold bracket already before the postseason tournament here. Now, for Keiser, I think going into the tournament, they were number 2 because Ottawa was undefeated at the time and they had one loss here. But in the tournament, they showed out as expected, beating Kodey in pool play 84-0 before getting by Baker 21-13 in pool play. But still, a win's a win as they earn a top seed here in the upper bracket. And that would start, even then, would still be tough because they would end up playing St. Thomas in the quarterfinals to start bracket play, and they would get by them, winning in a close one, 20-19. St. Thomas, a good squad over there, but Keiser beating a challenging opponent. They'll then go on and play Baker again, this time in the semis after already seeing them, and they beat them 34-13 to punch their ticket back to the national championship, where they faced a familiar foe in the rivals, Ottawa, and they would just fall short 20-34, just not quite being able to pace with Ottawa in that game, as it kind of got away from them. I wouldn't necessarily call it a blowout. I know when Kodey and Gino were there, it probably felt like the game was over a little bit sooner than that, than the fourth quarter, but it was what it was, right? They tried to do their best there, and they just couldn't quite match Ottawa in that matchup. I believe that was their only matchup with Ottawa last season, and, that would result in a loss. And so, with all of that being said, I think it's very easy to say they are easily the second best team in the country. At least last season they were, and solidified themselves as one of the top contenders in women's college flag football, and obviously in NAIA as well. But big season, 20-2, right? I think the only thing that you really wanted if you were going to be graduating / leaving this team was that national championship. And unfortunately, once more, they fall just a little bit short here. And, they do lose a lot of players. I think this is the most amount of players that they will be graduating / losing in program history. They lose 10, which doesn't sound like a lot, but for a team like Keiser, it is. I mean, a lot of these players were starters at one point, or were players that could have been starters on other teams, but stayed with Keiser pretty much. I think all of these players were recruited by Keiser and stayed with them all the way through their careers. And so, except for one, but we'll talk about her in a minute. Now, let's just go ahead and go down the line and list everyone who will be leaving. I will also go ahead and bring up some stats here for those players. Starting with their quarterback, the one-year starter from last year, Haley Young, who, has been waiting in the wings forever, started as a senior and had a great year as expected. All Sun Conference first team, all PMC quarterback. She was a quarterback of the year finalist, and then she was the offensive playmaker of the year winner for us, and with good reason, because she was extremely productive in her 1 year as the starter for Keiser here. Ended up throwing for 3,877 yards, 87 touchdowns to only 8 picks at an ultra accurate rate at 79%. That's a great completion percentage. And, she is definitely a record holder in a lot of Keiser records right now, I would say. And it's been great being able to cover her, and just watching her ball out in the year that she was the sole starter is big time. But, that's going to be tough. She will not be coming back to Keiser. She will be graduating. And so for the second straight year, now the third straight year, Keiser will have a different starting quarterback, with Haley Young leaving. They also graduate the legend herself, Miss Keiser herself, Kennedy Foster, who has been with the program since its first season, and she was an all-Sun Conference first teamer for them, and she's a legend for a reason. She was the 4th receiver statistically for Keiser, but has been their wideout one, I would say, for years now, even with all the talent they've brought in. But, in her time last season on offense, at least, she brought in 70 receptions for 745 yards and 23 touchdowns, led the team in receiving touchdowns right there. And then on defense, started at DB where she had 58 flag pulls and 12 interceptions and 6 pass breakups, just doing it all on both sides of the football. Kennedy Foster, like I said, a veteran, Miss Keiser herself. When you think about Keiser flag football, really when you think about women's college flag football, Kennedy Foster is in that conversation. And, we're really excited to be working with Kennedy Foster this upcoming season. But, we will reveal that at a different time. Now, in addition, they also lose Emma Wagman, an All-Sun Conference second-teamer for them, and somebody who has really done it all as well. But as one of their lead rushers, 31 flag pulls, 11 TFLs, 10 sacks, 6 pass breakups. She's been in that system forever. Was a check down option for them a while ago too. And so that is another veteran leaving. But she won't be the only one. They also lose Samaya Bryant. And I want to mention Adriana Cavallati as well, since they both play linebacker. Both of them were all-Sun Conference players at linebacker. And were all PMC players for us as well. I think Adriana Cavallati was the Sun Conference Defensive Player of the Year. And then Cavallati for us was a Linebacker of the Year candidate and a Defensive Playmaker of the Year finalist, as well as Samaya Bryant being a Linebacker of the Year finalist for us as well. But really, last season, the duo of Cavallati and Bryant was electric, to say the least, out there for Keiser. I really don't think there were two linebackers that were as elite at the same time as these two in the country were for Keiser. And, the stats really back that up. Looking at both of them, let's start with Adriana Cavallati here. 89 flag pulls, 1 TFL, 1 sack, 10 interceptions, 18 pass breakups for the senior linebacker. And then for Samaya Bryant, 81 flag pulls, 5 TFLs, 3 sacks, 11 interceptions, and 17 pass breakups. These two put in work for the Keiser defense, and why we were really high on this team going into the national tournament. We felt like with the defense that was playing at maybe the highest level, probably I would say the highest level ever, led by Cavallati and Bryant, that they would be the favorites to go ahead and win it all here. Now both of them will be graduating, and so that is definitely a tough loss there. They also graduate Melina, or at least she's not on the roster right now, but Melina Trinidad will be graduating as well. Another player who's been with them, I think, for 2 years, I want to say, if I'm saying that correctly. So there you go. They also will be graduating Chloe Griffin, who was an All-Sun Conference first-teamer for them last season. And Chloe Griffin was actually their second leading receiver for Keiser. She had 64 receptions for 847 yards and 15 touchdowns for the offense. And then defensively, she had 2 flag pulls as well. But I would say a very underrated receiver who had a really good college career at Keiser. I felt like if she ever left Keiser, she would have been an automatic number 1 on a number of teams and could have put up bigger numbers. But, she's what really made Keiser dangerous, and currently I would say probably in contention for Whiteout U as far as women's college flag football goes. And so there you go there. They also graduate Lysandra Amore, who had 10 flag pulls for them last season. They graduate Reagan Pellegrino as well for them, who had 19 flag pulls and 10 sacks and 12 tackles for loss as one of their other rushers. So losing a lot up front for sure. And then last but not least, they do lose one player to transfer, and that is Valentina Fonetti. She will be playing for a club team. I believe it is, I want to say Florida Atlantic or Florida International. She'll still be in state, but will be playing on the club level for one of those programs. So There you go there. But she is, I think, the only transfer that I was able to find right now, which is interesting. And so, just going back to the departures here, Keiser in total will be losing 10 players who are no longer on the roster. And, this kind of marks an end of an era. I want to take a moment and make sure I give these players their due because these players really helped found who Keiser became and is right now. Right, they were the core of Keiser. They were Keiser OG at women's flag football, and they're holding it down. They're the reason why Keiser is as great as they are right now and has been winning the last couple years, establishing themselves as a powerhouse in women's college flag football. I could always look back at this, but I don't think Keiser has fell below number 3 in the country for us in a really long time. If not ever. I don't think it might have ever happened, ever. But Keiser has always been top 3, and it's because of all of these great players and what they have been able to do. And, because of what they've been able to do, I think this team will continue to be super successful as they are one of the powerhouses in women's college flag football. So, shout out all of these great players. They have definitely made their mark on the game. A lot of future Hall of Famers, at least in my opinion, right here. A lot of great players as well who've given a lot to the game and the history of Keiser women's flag football. But this next group, and this is my transition here, this next group of recruits will probably help define the next era of Keiser flag football, as there is a little bit of a shift, I would say, as well. Now, Keiser lost 10 players. They bring in 10 players, so they will be at the number they were at last year. And they arguably bring in the number 1 recruiting class of 2025 here. Let's go ahead and start with the high school recruits, starting with the quarterback, the longtime quarterback for Texas Fury, Ava Wallace, out of Rouse High School in Texas. And if I'm saying that wrong, I apologize. But Ava Wallace has been a staple of girls high school flag football for a really long time. I think maybe one of the most recruited quarterbacks in Texas history, women's flag football history, boys football history. She is extremely talented, and I've said this for a while, in my opinion, the next great Texas quarterback to come out of that great state. And you know what? I'm biased. I'm from Texas, so of course I'm going to think that. But she is the truth. If you got to play her in club, you know what she can do. You know how smart she is. The abilities there. She is extremely experienced when it comes to quarterbacking and playing flag football. She's done it for a very, very long time. Longer than a lot of players who are going in and playing women's college flag football. And, she is somebody that, honestly, I really don't think there is a program in the country that would have said no to Ava Wallace coming to their program. And so this is a massive pickup for Keiser here. They get arguably the number 1 quarterback out of high school, at least out of Texas, I would say. And that's definitely big time here. And, she was a teammate. This is worth noting. She was a teammate with the likes of Ashley Clam, Sarah Villarreal, a lot of these other players, Hannah Jays, as well, a lot of these other players that play for Keiser. I mean, she was their quarterback for Texas Fury. And so the longtime Texas Fury leader, she's going to have a chance to compete for the starting job over at Keiser. For the first time ever, I think Keiser is going into a season without a quarterback who was on the roster for a previous season, with both Finetti and Haley Young leaving the program. And so she will definitely have an opportunity either sooner than later, I would assume, there. And so that's a huge, huge recruit for Keiser to be bringing in and help ushering in a new era of Keiser flag football. Now, the other player that will be helping introduce a new era here to Keiser flag football is Sophie Guitron here from California, wide receiver linebacker from Mira Costa High School over there. and part of SoCal Conquer. If Ava Wallace is the top recruit in Texas coming to Keiser, she is the top recruit in California also coming to Keiser. And honestly, can you really think of any football team that has struggled to succeed with a top recruit from Texas and California? I think not. She is an excellent skill player to be coming in here like Ava Wallace. I don't think there's a program in the country, even really the world, if we're being completely honest with you, that would have said no to her coming to their program. But Keiser has pulled it off, and they have brought in one of the best, if not the best, two-way player in the country to come to their program here. And, you know, she's just a long line of fantastic skill players to bring their talents to West Palm Beach here. She is excellent. She is somebody who would be a wideout 1, DB1 on a lot of different teams. And, you know, I would expect her to, I mean, it's a tough rotation to crack, but to get involved in this Keiser rotation. She is somebody listed at, by the way, wide receiver linebacker. She's somebody that could definitely hop in there right away and help fill the void of losing a Cavallati, Samaya Bryant, right away, and do a very good job at holding it down, as well as just another great receiving threat for them. Somebody, once again, who could be a number 1 receiver anywhere else. She will be joining Keiser here and will be helping stack that roster just a little bit more. Either way, she's a very talented player, somebody that we hope to interview sometime as well. Big fan of her game and looking forward to seeing what she can do this season. Now, coming back to Florida, Keiser also recruited another quarterback from Fort Pierce Central High School here in Adrian Rivera, one of the most accomplished players in Florida flag football history for them. A 4-year starter, by the way, on varsity with a career total of 14,978 passing yards, 184 touchdowns to 82 picks, and then also adding on another 2,285 rushing yards and 35 rushing touchdowns. Somebody who is a dual threat, and having just so much experience and a lot of success in Florida, the state to do it all first here. She is another quarterback to watch in the mix for that starting QB job. And also, it is worth noting for Keiser, this is a team that has rolled out the 2 quarterback look, and is probably the most successful team in the country next to Ottawa and probably Baker to run 2 quarterback looks. And so bringing in a player like Adrian Rivera, first off, I don't doubt that she could have played for a lot of other programs here, but she is a proven winner. She is proven to be very successful in the state that has done it the longest here, and definitely a player that you need to keep an eye on going into this next season for Keiser. Now, sticking locally, they also bring in Serenity Simon from Palmetto High School in Miami in Florida. She was a finalist, I believe, for NFL Flag Football Player of the Year, and for good reason. She's another very, very successful and productive player for Keiser to be bringing in here, who was very successful in Florida. She was just a do-it-all player on offense. I mean, I'm looking at the stats here: 330 career passing yards, 643 career rushing yards, 920 career receiving yards, and then obviously multiple touchdowns at each of those. But on defense, she really did her thing there. 92 career flagpoles in the 2 seasons, I believe, that I was able to find her on varsity, and then also 11 sacks and 6 picks to go with that. She's a very productive wide receiver DB coming to Keiser, somebody who was very successful on both sides of the football, and obviously that is something that Keiser is always looking for: great two-way players that can contribute to this team. In addition, I think the one other player they bring in from Florida is Francesca Lara here, a cornerback from Miami Palmetto as well. And so Miami Palmetto, one of the great, I would say, high school flag football programs in the country, so you could never go wrong with players from there. And then before I go back and talk about the other Texas players they bring in, because they do bring in two more, I want to make sure I mention Madison Koger, a wide receiver DB from Campo Verde High School in Arizona. One of the top players in Arizona to be coming to Keiser here. You know, the stats say it all, and I'm just going to read them out because they're pretty insane here. But her junior year, these are receiving yards, by the way, in 16 games, had 2,417 receiving yards and 22 touchdowns on 137 receptions. In her senior year, you know, teams kind of figured it out. The numbers went down a little bit, but still in 20 games played, 114 receptions, 1,851 yards, and 16 receiving touchdowns. And then defensively, 93 career flagpoles and 26 career interceptions. Another great two-way player playing wide receiver and DB, standing at 5'9", mind you. For Keiser, she is going to be a great player to potentially have in that rotation, either at wide receiver or DB. Either way, once again, Keiser super deep, going after the best two-way players in the entire country. And now, this isn't to diminish what they've done in high school either. They're great players, but we got a lot of returners we got to talk about here as well. I got to shout out the other players they bring in Brooke Bowman from Saxe High School. Shout out DFW, wide receiver, linebacker, and a player for Texas Fury. Love seeing that. And once again, shout out DFW, Saxe. Me being from the area, love seeing players succeed and go on and play on the next level. So there you go there. And then they also bring in Caroline Jays, I believe the sister of Hannah Jays here, but she is a rusher from Pflugerville in Texas, went to Hendrickson High School, and they will be joining the other Texas Fury players on this roster. So there you go there. I think that high school recruiting class alone, elite. And on top of that, you have players coming back too. So the rich only gets richer. These players will help usher in a new era of Keiser flag football. But, you know, they also bring in some transfers here. Let's start with Tremisha Harris, the wide receiver DB from Florida Gateway. Extremely productive. Arguably the best JUCO flag football player in the country. Definitely one of the best flag football players in the country regardless. She is somebody that can contribute right away, contributed to a national championship last year and I believe the year before as well, helping or looking to help Keiser get their next national championship / their first one. And so that's as good as any to bring in to help replace a Kennedy Foster and some of these other veterans they have lost. But the other transfer they are also bringing in that I think will help them a lot is Keelan Coleman, a quarterback from Thomas. You know, she actually made our all-freshman team at quarterback and started a number of games for Thomas last season. And actually, I have the stats here. Last season for Thomas in the game she played in had 2,009 passing yards, 36 touchdowns, and then to only 9 interceptions. Funny enough, she actually led Thomas to a win over Keiser, going 19 of 29 for 214 yards and 2 touchdowns in that game. And then I think her biggest statistical game, if I had to look through this, would probably have to be her performance against Weber International, where she went 18 of 20 for 238 yards and 5 touchdowns. She would also end up beating Warner pretty bad the next day as well, throwing 4 against them. But she is a proven winner, super talented with a big arm, can make all the throws for them, and was very successful for them last season. Now, with all that being said, she's coming to Keiser from Thomas, which does mean this is an in-conference transfer, and I wasn't sure because there have been instances in the past where players have just been able to transfer in conference and have not had to sit. But for Keelan Coleman, it does look like she is going to have to miss this season. Wanted to include that part in the preview where we talked about her because I do think if she didn't have to sit, she would easily be the starter, a proven winner in the Sun Conference, right? Playing for a top team in the country and beating other top teams in the country, including this one right here. I kind of feel like that is hard to ignore. And up until pretty much today, when I'm recording this half of the preview, it is January 20th. So this is added to the segment that I was recording here. She would have been the presumed starter at Keiser. And I think that does reflect in our all-PMC, all-freshman list as well. So the quarterback battle will come down to the two freshmen for them, Ava Wallace and Adrian Rivera, which makes things infinitely more interesting for sure. And so let's just go ahead and talk about it, because I do think the fate of Keiser's season does end up relying on who plays quarterback and how high of a level they could play quarterback at. Now, knowing Keiser, right, they've had a very, very good track record of developing quarterbacks and having quarterbacks that have just been super productive. Now, like I said, this is the first year without a quarterback who was not on the roster the year before. So neither Wallace or Rivera were on this roster the year before. Maybe around the team a whole lot, right? But that's not the exact same thing as being on the roster, getting reps, because that's what Keiser does, right? They develop a lot in game. They go up by a bunch, and then they get those backups in, right? None of these players have that. And I think it would have been easy, really easy, to just be like, hey, Keelan Coleman, you're the starter. You know, you're a proven winner. Runner-up in the Sun Conference, one of the best in the country. You're the starter while we get these freshmen going. Maybe there's even a chance that, Keelan Coleman holds on to the job and doesn't give it up. I think that's the most probable outcome if she was to play this year. But it comes down to the freshmen. And so Ava Wallace, Adrian Rivera, two types of quarterbacks who are a little bit different. Rivera could run the ball just a little bit more here. Keiser could use both. I think there's a good chance they could do that. They're talented enough to do that. But when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, they're going to commit to a quarterback, and they're going to pick one quarterback to go ahead and put behind the center, and then they're just going to run it. And they're going to go hurry up, and they're going to go tempo, and then they're just going to run their plays through that quarterback. And I think the last thing you want is a quarterback controversy. Now, if I had to pick, I would probably assume Ava Wallace is the starter, but you never know with these things. You never do. So that definitely makes things interesting for Keiser, on top of losing their defensive starters as well. Now, they have great players to come in and replace them for sure, but there is a chemistry piece to this too. So we'll see what happens, but I'm still high on Keiser no matter what, really. Let's go ahead and look, though, at their season here in 2026, which will start on February 19th at Keiser. It's a Thursday. They'll play Lise McRae, which is a D2 school, but does contain a number of key players from that Fierce Freshies William Wood squad. I'm just going to assume Keiser beats them. I mean, that's a team with a lot of talent, but they're still gelling, right? It's a new program for pretty much everyone there. They're getting used to how they play. I think Keiser, even with the questions at quarterback and linebacker and whatnot, they have enough talent to go ahead and get by. And I would be surprised if it's super close, too. Then they play Life. That should probably be a win as well, before heading up to Reinhardt in Georgia and playing a number of teams here, including Ottawa, the defending national champions. Both teams replacing the quarterbacks. The difference, though, is Ottawa most likely had a quarterback who was already on the roster. So it could get interesting. I think it's a close game, but I'm going to go ahead and lean Keiser right here to beat Ottawa. Ottawa, they are losing a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if they won, right? I think this will be a very close game. Will probably come down to the wire, but we are going to see what these two teams have and how prepared they are with the new quarterbacks and new players that they got to plug in. But regardless, this will be a big powerhouse matchup, a must-see game for sure. Then, which is unfortunate because it's on a Thursday at like noon, so I don't know. Then, after that, they play Wingate, probably the best first-year program team in the country right now, or will be. That'll be a little bit of a challenge. I'm still going to favor Keiser in that one, as well as their game against Reinhardt. Following that, the next week they go to Tampa and they're going to play in a tournament, so there'll be some games there. But really the rest of their schedule, I mean, I kind of have them favored in pretty much everything, and it's not super close. Thomas, maybe there's something there, but really that's a rebuilding program. I think Keiser by this point, even with the rookie quarterback, should be able to beat him. Point, Bruden Parker Christian, FMU should probably all be wins. Weber could be a little bit sneaky there too, but Weber is also going through a quarterback change, so I'm going to go ahead and lean Keiser. Same with St. Thomas, they're going with a quarterback change too, so I'm leaning Keiser. Then they play Warner. This is probably the biggest threat to their season. Regular season, no doubt. Outside of Ottawa and all of them, for sure. As far as in conference goes, I expect Warner to be a big challenger here. And this is where it gets interesting, because whoever wins the regular season, like conference championship, or conference title, I should say, will host the conference championship. And, Keiser, they've done it before, so they've been here before. This game at the end of the season will decide where they play that conference championship. And so that'll be a big game right there. Like I said, Warner's going to be a huge threat. Great skill players over there. But the key is that they actually bring a quarterback back. And out of all the big contenders in the Sun Conference, they are the only team that brings back a QB from last season. And that is a massive problem there. If you are Keiser, that's not going to be easy to play against, especially, it'll be late enough in the season where, your defensive players would have had time to adjust and settle in, but that doesn't make Warner any less tougher, who really didn't lose too much, if I'm being honest with you, and so this will be a key game here. It is at Warner. For now, I'm going to say this is a loss, but it's a long season. I think predicting this far out is always pretty tough, because you never know how players are going to develop, who's going to get hot as the season goes on here. Other than that, I feel like Keiser's a top 3 team in the country. I think, and this is my mindset in my opinion, before we knew for sure what was going to happen to Keelan Coleman, I would have had Keiser number 1. I think a proven quarterback, a super talented quarterback at that, a great roster that's super experienced, that was filling in, open spots on their lineup with like top players in the country. Really couldn't go wrong with that. Now, it's slightly different, because to be a true contender and a champion at that, because I think they're tired of being contenders, they want to be a champion, you need to have a quarterback who can not only manage the game, but could make those big throws down the line when needed. And it's going to be tough. I'm not going to lie. It's going to be tough for sure. And it might not be a perfect season. But if you are Keiser, it doesn't matter if you have a perfect regular season. What matters is that you develop as far as you can and get as sound and as good as much as you can before the NAIA finals. We'll just have to see what happens. Right now, and by the way, the Sun Conference preseason coaches poll came out. Keiser's ranked at number 1. So the pressure's always been there. When you go to Keiser, I think that's something that everyone understands. It's built into the culture, right? High level performance, high expectations. That's what Keiser does. That is what Keiser expects. And when you expect something like that for a long time, right, that margin of error becomes minuscule. I do not think they could afford a down year. And I don't think there will be. That's not what I'm saying. But I do think it would be a massive disappointment if Keiser does not at least make the semis and play within a score of whoever they would lose to. And that's the very, very minimum for sure. I think the expectation is to win a national championship. And for the coaches and for the players and everyone over there, anything less than that would probably be a disappointment. That is the expectation level that I feel like Keiser is at right now. And you got to be. When you win this much, when you get so close to winning a national championship this much, you do end up feeling like you're owed. And so it is up to Keiser to collect, because nobody's going to collect for them when you feel that way. That's just it. Nobody is ever going to hand over a debt. You gotta go collect if you are Keiser. And that is the big storyline going into this season. Are they going to collect? And it's going to come down to play from their young players. Somebody has to go step up. They got to play at a very high level. The quarterback position, it has to be stable. They have to play at a high level. They have to match the pace of these other contenders and offenses they have, who have players who have been on the roster last season and know what it's like to go through that late season grind, that postseason grind. And it's not to say that these freshmen don't have experience. They do, but it is a little bit different for sure. So we're going to see what happens, right? I'm really excited. I'm very excited to see, just all these storylines go on. And obviously, if you are a fan of good football, go watch Keiser flag football play. The number of potential Olympians on that squad, crazy. Just such a fun team to watch. They're going to be a fun team to watch forever, really. And going into this season, I have no doubts about that. And so we are really excited about this. Best of luck to the coaching staff. Shout out all the great players over there. We are looking forward to covering them once more this 2026 season.
And those are some of the most electric programs that we are covering this year. Make sure to double back and listen through all of our other previews that span JUCO, D2, D3, and our coverage that's going to cover all of those levels, as well as the one that we've been holding down for the past few years on the NAIA level here. All three of these teams are teams that I feel like competitively could be in the mix here, as well as a handful of other teams that we've already covered here. Double back to one of my episodes where I got to talk about Ottawa as well as Warner. Listen to some of Coach V's episodes where he gets to talk about Thomas and other legendary programs like that. Double back to Gino, who got to cover Milligan, who is one of the programs that really burst out last season and is trying to turn that corner from that silver bracket they were in into even more than that, as well as a lot of the new programs that we've been able to cover, and all of these fantastic athletes that are getting their chance to showcase their skills and display that they are next level players with next level talent here to put flag football as a thing to stay. We also are celebrating the news of the NCAA announcing it as an emerging sport on the D1, D2, and D3 levels, so we're very, very excited to see that growth continue to take place, and these players and pioneers of the sport continuing to trailblaze with high-level playmaking and let their play do the talking for them, and these fantastic female athletes that are helping carve out a path for young girls to have another direction or journey to high-level athletics. I have been your host, joined by Coach V on this episode of Playmakers Corner. Please be sure to follow us at Playmaker Corner on Twitter /X, at Playmakers Corner on Instagram, Playmakers Corner on Facebook, and then go ahead and find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you need to. Subscribe to us, follow us, turn on notifications so you know when all of the latest comes out, as we are getting ready for preseason power rankings, as well as our beginning of the coverage coming up in here in February. So thank you all so much for contributing here, and best of luck to all of these athletes and coaches heading into this season. I've been your host, Cody Stauffer, signing off. Peace.